What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video today I want to show you how we can build good looking, modern and interactive web applications using only Python by utilizing FastHTML and a UI framework called MonsterUI. So let us get right into it. Alright, now let me briefly show you what's possible with the stack that we're going to use in this video today. And again, all of this is going to be pure Python code. So every single line of code we write is going to be Python, not a single line of HTML, CSS, or JavaScript will be written. We're going to write pure Python. Of course, what we end up having in our browser is actually JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, but we don't have to write it. So all of this will be Python. And we can build dynamic interactive web applications. For example, here I have this to-do list application and I can add to-dos here on the fly. So I can say go shopping, for example. I can say go to gym. I can say read book, for example, whatever. And you can see all of these are added dynamically below. And this is also connected to a database. So we're actually doing database writing and reading behind the scenes, but I don't need to reload the page to see any changes. So you can see down here, I also have 3 of 3 tasks remaining. This changes when I check the boxes. You can see 2, 1 of 3 tasks remaining. I can also delete entries here. I can edit them. I can change the text, so to say. I can save, and I don't need to reload the page at all. I can though, nothing is lost. So all of this, as I said, is stored in a SQLite database. And a second example would be here, this basic counter application. So I can just increase the number, decrease the number, which is a global state in the Python script. And I can also do stuff like this, and I will get some text rendered dynamically into the page. So this is a more basic example. This is here a more sophisticated example. And in this video today, I want to show you how you can easily build all of that by just using Python. So let us get started right away. What I want to do in this video here is I want to code one of the examples that I just showed you from scratch, the one with the counter, the simple one, just to show you step by step how this is done. Then I also want to provide you with the code for both examples that I showed you. So for the to-do list application and also for the counter, you will find a link in the description down below. And then I want to show you a little hack or trick that you can use to easily build applications using large language models in MonsterUI, because they have something in their GitHub repository that is quite useful if you want to do it that way. So we're going to talk about this at the end. But let us now get started with a simple example. For this, we're going to go into our working directory. And here now you have to just install the 2 packages, so MonsterUI and FastHTML. You can either do that with pip, so pip or pip3 install, or you can use UV. In my case here, I'm going to use UV. I'm just going to say UV init. In your case, you just have to do pip or pip3 install the packages. I'm going to do UV at and the packages. And the packages are called MonsterUI, as you can see here, and also Python-FastHTML. And you can think of FastHTML to be like the framework that allows you to do everything in Python, and MonsterUI is a UI framework around it that uses Tailwind and allows you to style your applications easily. So I'm going to say here MonsterUI, and I'm going to say Python-FastHTML. Then everything is installed, and now I'm going to edit this main.py file. So let us get started with the imports. What we're going to do is we're going to say from fasthtml.common import, and now you have 2 choices. You can either import specific elements that you want to use, specific functions that you want to use one by one explicitly, or you can use a wildcard import and say import everything. Now, usually wildcard imports are not a good practice. Usually it's not recommended. In the case of FastHTML and MonsterUI, it can make sense if you use a lot of elements, because you don't want to always type fasthtml dot heading 1 or dot div or dot paragraph and all that. So I would say it's permissible. For the sake of understanding, we're going to do explicit imports, but if you use a lot of elements, it's fine to say from fasthtml.common import everything. Same thing here with monsterui.all. You can also say import everything, but we're going to import specific things. We're going to import the serve function from FastHTML, which is the one we use to serve the application. Then the basic div and span elements. These are just the ordinary HTML tags. So let me just zoom in a little bit here. These would be in HTML, the div tag and the span tag. So of course we don't write HTML, but we have to still refer to the elements. We still need to define containers and spans and paragraphs and all that. We just do all of it with Python classes. And from MonsterUI now, we're going to import quite a bit. We're going to say heading of size 1, heading of size 2, a card, a button, a form, the input, button T, container, container T, theme, and fast app. So again, you can use an asterisk if you want to, but these are the things that we're going to use in this video today. Most of them just HTML tags, and a couple of these things are for styling, and some of them are just for the application itself. So what we're going to do first is we're going to say app and route or router is going to be equal to fast_app. This is going to create an instance for our app here. This is very similar to fast API syntax. All we have to do here is we have to pass a theme that we want to use. So HDRS is equal to theme.blue.headers. You can also choose a different one if you want to. This is just one theme that you can choose. This already gives the application a certain style. And now we can implement the logic of our counter. So for this, we're going to say here counter is equal to 0. This is going to be a global variable. And then we can define some routes that are going to interact with this variable. So for example, I can say route /increment. So /inc is going to have the methods post. So we're going to be able to post to this endpoint. And what this is going to do is we're going to increment the value. So we're going to say global counter plus equals 1, and then return counter. Now we can copy this. We can paste it down here. We can say decrement as well, like this, DEC, and we just say minus equals 1. And then maybe the third endpoint that I also showed you is the hello. So we're going to say hello. And also the methods here are going to be equal to post. And we're also going to provide some context here. So let me just make this a list. We're also going to provide a name. So we're going to say hello, name is string. And then we're going to just return a formatted string, hello, name. Now, of course, the interesting part here is not just having these endpoints and being able to use them. We can have the same thing in Fast API in a raw backend application. We also want to have a modern looking UI that allows us to interact with these endpoints dynamically so that we can render the results into our web page without having to reload it. So we use JavaScript actually, but we don't write JavaScript. All of this will be done for us automatically by translating our Python code into the respective languages, but we want to have our user interface in a modern and dynamic way interacting with this backend, so with these backend functions. For this, we're going to have an endpoint, the default endpoint, just RT, which is going to be the index function, and this is going to allow us to define the user interface by returning a container, and in this container, we're going to have a bunch of UI elements. And with HTMX attributes, we're going to be able to say clicking a button will post to this endpoint, then this is linked to that, and so on. We're going to have certain attributes that define the behavior of the individual UI components. We're also going to have classes that are Tailwind classes, which are going to style our application. But all in all, we're just defining our user interface and the functionality using Python code. So we're going to start here with a basic heading of size 1, which is the largest heading. And I'm just going to paste an emoji here, a rocket, and I'm going to call this counter app. Now for the class, we're going to use certain Tailwind classes, for example, text 3XL, which is quite large. We're going to use font bold. We're going to use text center. We're going to use margin bottom 6 and margin top 6. I think these are all self-explanatory. This is the size, this is just bold text, this is just centered text, and this is just some margin at the bottom and the top, so some spacing essentially. Then we're going to have a cart, which is like a section where stuff can be in that section again. A little bit like a container, but visually a little bit different. So we have a cart, and in this cart we're going to say, first of all, that the cart itself has classes again. So we're going to say padding of size 6 in all directions, text center, and margin bottom 4. And again, you can change the styling however you want. This is just Tailwind stuff. So technically speaking, we're still writing Python code, but this is the stuff that you would actually write in HTML as well. So you would do something like h1, and then you would have the text in here, and then you would do some stuff like defining the class in the h1 tag. So you would do class is equal to, and then you would write all these classes here. So technically speaking, yes, we're writing Python code, but it's quite similar to actually writing HTML and using Tailwind classes, which is exactly what we're doing, but it's still much simpler than actually using JavaScript and defining all these behaviors yourself. So that is the card. Actually, we need to do it like this. So we define the card and then we call it. So we create the instance here with a class, and then we use parentheses to call this. And in here, we now paste the other elements. First of all, a heading of size 2. We're going to say click the buttons with the class margin bottom 4. So margin is outside spacing, you could say, and padding is spacing from within. It's a little bit hard to explain, but like when you have a square, margin would be the distance outside of the square, and padding would be having some more space to the boundaries of the square within the square. I'm not sure if that's the best way to put it. I hope you understand what I mean by that. Yeah, then we're going to say diff another container here, or actually the first container with the following classes. We're going to say flex items center justify center gap 4. We create that again. We use parentheses to call this instance again. And in here, we put now other elements. So that's the basic principle. You create something by using the constructor. So card, for example, then you open up parentheses. So you call the instance and you put some stuff in there. Here, same thing. We create the diff and then we call it to put some stuff in there. And what we do here is a button with the text minus, or actually let's use an emoji, minus, and let's say hx post. This is now important. This is now htmx. What this basically means is the hx post attribute allows me to specify what I'm actually calling. So for example, I can say /dec for decrement, which means that this is going to call this function here. So clicking this button is going to post to this endpoint. And I can do this now by saying hx target and then hashtag count. Now, what does this do? What this basically does is it posts to the endpoint, but the endpoint returns something, and this return value is going to be stored in the UI element, in the tag, or in the HTML element that has the ID count, which means we need such an element. We're going to say it's a span. The span has the ID count. Now, hashtag means ID. If you want to use class, you use dot, and hashtag is ID. So we're referring to this span here. We're saying the class here is text -2xl font bold, and that is going to have counter in here. So remember, counter is our global variable. Now I can copy this, I can paste it down here, I can change this to the plus emoji, and I can link to the increment endpoint. Quite simple. Now let's add a second card for the hello function. Here we're just going to say class is equal to padding 6. Again, parentheses to add into this card some elements. We're going to add a form. In this form, why do we need a form? Because we have a name that we need to pass. So we pass actually a payload to this post call. So we have form. And in this form, we say post is equal to /hello. So it's the same as for the button, but since we have a payload, we need a form for it. So we need a submit button and we need some input text that we can have in this form. Now we say hx target is going to be equal to hashtag result. So we need again an object that has the ID result. Now we call this instance to add some stuff to the form. We say input, the name is equal to name. Now it's important that this has the same name as the parameter here. So this name here needs to be equal to this name. So if the parameter here would be called XYZ, we would have to say name is equal to XYZ. This name is just the name of the attribute. So this is always name. So name is name. Then we say placeholder is equal to your name. And the class is going to be equal to margin bottom 2. That is our input, and now we need a button for submitting. We're going to just say hello. And then the class, this is why we imported the button T and container T. This is like just for specifying the type. And here we're now going to say button T.primary. And for the container, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say at the end of that, so this is the container. So down here, we're going to say class is equal to container T.sm for small. But before that, we also want to have here a diff with the result. So the idea of that is going to be a result. And the class is going to be equal to mt4, so margin top 4, font bold. So yeah, here we have the ID for the result. Here we have the ID for the counter or for count. This is the default value, and by targeting, we say the return value is stored there. So I hope I don't have any mistakes here in terms of syntax. Now, the last thing that we need to do is we need to say serve. That's it. And this is how you can easily build such an application. This is very minimalistic, but now what I can do is I can say uv run main.py, or you could also say python 3 main.py. Of course, I have a problem here. A comma is missing. Where is this comma missing? It's missing here. I have another comma missing for the cart. Yeah, here, I guess. And I have another comma missing, which is here, I think. There you go. Now I can run this. I can open up the browser. And here we have the resulting application. I can add, I can subtract, I can enter a name here. I get hello. And that is the very simple way to do that. Now, let me show you here also the code for the other application. As I said, you're going to get both on GitHub, so you don't have to now pause the video and type it off. I just want to show you what's possible here. This is my prepared code. I didn't want to type this out now in this video. But when I say prepared code, this one actually, and this will bring me to the next point now, this is actually generated with AI. And the reason this is possible with such accuracy is because they offer something very powerful. But let's just briefly take a look at that. We have a SQLite connection. We have a basic create table statement. This is just a setup stuff. And then we have our components. This is structured like React components, you could say, where you have an item, you have an edit, you have empty state, you have all this stuff here that we can just reuse now in our index endpoint. So you can see I'm referring here to stuff like item, I'm referring to empty state, I'm referring to these things that I define up here. So I can define components and I can reuse them in my index endpoint. So yeah, you can take a look at the code if you want to. It's quite interesting to see how you can do all of this in pure Python. It's not a lot of code. It's just too much for a simple video where I don't want to spend an hour just typing code and especially typing CSS classes. So this is quite straightforward. But what I want to show you now, which is what I just mentioned, is that you can use something offered by MonsterUI in the GitHub repository. And this is down here, the LM context files. Now, what are these files? These are things that you can upload to a large language model when you're asking the large language model to generate code with MonsterUI. So for example, you have here the MonsterUI documentation pages. So that is, I think, actually this one is probably the most comprehensive one, but this is good enough, I guess. This is just a raw text file with markdown format where you have all the signatures of the functions and you have all the stuff that is relevant to understand how MonsterUI works. You don't have to read through that, but the basic idea is you can take this file, you can copy paste it, or you can just upload it directly to the large language model and then ask it to do something. So it's not as large as to say that you don't have enough context. So you can easily fit that into the basic context window of most LLMs. You can provide this as context, and then you can say, build an application using FastHTML and MonsterUI to do XYZ. And then you can easily do that very correctly because they offer these LLM context files. So you can load that into Cursor, you can load that into ChatGPT and ask it to generate a pretty complex application. And you don't have to be afraid of hallucinations so much because you give it the context, which is the documentation, the entire API specification here in a very simple form. And yeah, this is a kind of cool approach, I think, to provide something like this, because nowadays a lot of people are vibe coding or coding by prompt. I think this is a very useful thing to prevent hallucination, or at least to reduce it. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching, see you in the next video, and bye.